My name is Henry Hamilton III. I'm the 136th President of the Iowa State Bar Association, and I welcome you to the ISBA's People's Law School program, Advancing the Rule of Law Now, Accountability and Access, a call to action that we're putting on for the 2022 Katie Day of Service program. I want to thank the Iowa State Bar Association and the Polk County Bar Association for sponsoring this People's Law School program. The Iowa State Bar Association's People's Law School provides free educational events where members of the public can find answers to life's legal questions. ISBA members volunteer to present information on a variety of legal topics and answer general questions. The Iowa State Bar Association's People's Law School events focus on a variety of issues impacting Iowans, including guardianship and conservatorship, law basics, will and revocable trust, child custody laws, consumer protections, and more. And as I said today, our conversation will be on the rule of law. I will be joined by Melvin Shaw. Melvin Shaw is a solo practitioner at the law office of Melvin O. Shaw PLC in Coralville, Iowa. His practice includes real estate planning, and probate and business law. Melvin Shaw is Vice President of the Iowa State Bar Association. He is a member of the Iowa State Bar Association probate, real estate, business law sections. He is a graduate of the University of Iowa College of Law and has a master's degree in journalism from the University of Iowa and a BA in political science from the University of Missouri, Columbia. Melvin is a member of the American Bar Association, Solo, Small Firm, and General Practice Division, and is a GP Solo Division Delegate to the ABA House of Delegates and currently serving as Secretary of the General Practice Solo and Small Firm Division of the ABA. Emily Gould Chafa has spent most of her legal career in state and local government practice, retiring in July of 2019. She remains actively involved in numerous professional associations, including longtime service as chair of the Iowa State Bar Association Diversity and Inclusiveness Committee. Emily currently serves as co-chair of the American Bar Association Judicial Vision Judicial Outreach Committee. This committee focuses on presentations to the public on the rule of law and the role of judges in our democracy. Emily attended Wartburg College and received her BA from Drake University. She received her law degree from the Loyola Law School in Chicago. She is licensed to practice in Iowa and Illinois. She is actively involved in several organizations. These include the Iowa State Bar Association, the Polk County Bar Association, Blackstone Inn of Court, the ABA Judicial Division, National Conference of the Administrative Law Judiciary, the American Bar Association Civil Rights and Social Justice Section, the National Association of Administrative Law Judge, and its Iowa affiliate, the Iowa Association of Administrative Law Judges, in addition to the National Association of Women Judges and the Iowa Organization of Women Attorneys. She is a longtime member of the Iowa Supreme Court's Interpreter Advisor Group. She frequently presents on numerous CLE programs on a variety of topics, including diversity, equity, inclusion, the importance of preserving the rule of law, voting rights, language access, and other important areas. She is also a 2004 recipient of the Iowa Organization of Women Attorneys Arabella Mansfield Award, named after the first licensed female attorney. She received the Polk County Bar Association Award of Merit in 2019 and has a myriad of other awards. And in 2018, she received the Iowa Supreme Court Justice David Wiggins Award for her strong support of justice. She takes this man seriously, speaking up for justice and calling out injustices whenever and however possible. I hope you all welcome the panel this afternoon. We will first call upon Melvin Shaw, he will give us a brief description of why we do this in honor of our late Chief Justice Mark Cady. Then we'll follow that. Emily will give a general background on our democracy and the rule of law. I'll talk about some challenges facing our democracy and the rule of law. And then finally, we'll come back to Melvin Shaw that will teach us or educate us about actions that we can take to preserve the rule of law and our freedoms of democracy. Melvin?
Thank you, President Hamilton. It is a pleasure to be on this webinar with you and with Emily as presenters. I am flattered to be able to work with you on behalf of the Iowa State Bar Association. It's a privilege to be able to work again with Emily on some issues that are really important to our state bar. For all of those of you who are attending online, thank you for attending. And let me read a little bit about Mark S. Cady Day of Public Service, not to be scripted, but so that I do not make an error. So again, welcome to this special ISBA and Polk County Bar Association co-sponsored event. We're here today to celebrate the 2022 statewide Mark S. Cady Day of Public Service. Members of the state legal community are invited to participate in some form of public service or pro bono work. And this is one form of it, this webinar. We're doing this to honor the legacy of the late Chief Justice Mark Cady, who passed away in November of 2019. As many of you know, Justice Cady's career as a public servant spanned for over 4 decades. And it was marked by his devotion and his passion and pursuit of justice for all Iowans. This today marks our 3rd annual day of public service. And we are a part of this webinar. We're going to talk about access to justice, public service, civility in the practice of law, civil rights and social justice issues, all in an amalgamation. Over the past 2 years, those of you who have participated in these days of public service before, you know that hundreds of volunteers across the state have united in their service in their communities in honor of the late Chief Justice. Tens of thousands more have been positively impacted through community service events such as this, free legal clinics, and educational programming. I encourage you to visit the Drake Law School website, which has posted a link for you to register your 2022 Cady Day of Public Service project. The web address is drake.edu/law/alumni. That's drake.edu/law/alumni. And if I can, President Hamilton, I'd like to say just a little bit about the life of Justice Cady, if I can. The late Justice Cady was a graduate of Drake University Law School. He had a 37-year career in public service, which beginning in 1983 as a district court judge. He was appointed to the Iowa Supreme Court in 1988 and was named Chief Justice in 2010 until his death in 2019. Drake Law School has published a memoriam, as I call it, to Justice Cady's life, which includes how the Chief Justice established the Iowa Access to Justice Commission to assist Iowans who have difficulties accessing the Iowa justice system. He helped expand Iowa special family, veterans, and drug courts. And more recently, in February 2021, the National Center for State Courts announced that the Family Justice Reform Initiative would be renamed the Chief Justice Mark S. Cady Family Justice Reform Initiative. The National Center for State Courts is headquartered in Virginia, and it is dedicated to improving the administration of justice by providing leadership to the state courts. Many folks have regarded Justice Cady as a champion of juvenile justice and family justice reform. For me, he was an incredible jurist. He was a keen listener and one of the most generous persons that I've ever had the opportunity to work with and learn from. Henry?
Thank you, Mel. And now I call upon Emily Gould Chafa to give us a general presentation about the importance of the rule of law. Thank you.
Great, thank you. You can all relax for one moment while I find my PowerPoint and share my screen. Oh, here it is. So here, let me get back to the beginning. Another moment while I correctly share the beginning of the PowerPoint. Doesn't want to start. So one reason I included one activity in my, there we go. In my bio is because this is indeed the presentation that I will share this afternoon. So the American Bar Association's Judicial Division has a program. It began about 5 or 6 years ago called National Judicial Outreach Week. And the point of this program is similar to the Iowa State Bar Association's People's Law School. The point is to share with members of the public, what the rule of law means, and describes the important role that the judicial branch and or other judges in other branches of government play in our democracy, and specifically in preserving the rule of law. So that's the context of this program. So I looked through the list and the screens, and many of you attending today are lawyers and some retired judges as well. So I hope all of you will find this informative. But we'll go ahead and start. And so it's designed for members of the public who are not necessarily lawyers or have a legal education. So this shows us the traditional Lady Justice. She's holding the scales of justice that should be equal. You can see they're not quite equal. You see her holding, the book. We can imagine this to be the Iowa Code, the U.S. Constitution, the Iowa Constitution, United States Code, a myriad numbers of administrative rules and regulations, what we'd call the law. You see the blindfold, and it's traditionally said that justice is blind. A wise judge recently argued that we should take the blindfold off. The justice is indeed not blind, but should see everyone and all the information, all the evidence through wide open eyes, free of implicit bias. And as we all know, the scales of justice should indeed be equal, not one above the other. So why do we care about the rule of law? Why is it so important to us as in the United States, in our democracy? Let's think back to good old King George III. Remember how he treated his subjects, what he called his subjects, all of the people who lived in the 13 colonies. When I'm speaking to school groups, I usually ask the kids, and I guess I'll also ask all of you, if you've seen the musical Hamilton, you've got your own image of King George III and his attitude toward the colonies. So how did King George III rule? He was the king, he was above the law. He could apply whatever laws he wanted to other people, but not to himself. So that is indeed, of course, the opposite of the rule of law. The rule of a king, the rule of, a man, one person. And of course, in our government, in our democracy, we are a government of laws. Everyone is subject to the same requirements of our laws. And that's basically the rule of law. No one's above the law, and no one is below, or no one is subject differently to the law. So here's one example of no one above the law. Let's see, maybe this is a familiar photo to you. Maybe both of the people in this photo are familiar to you, but remember, one of these is a convicted felon. Which one of these is a convicted felon? I'm hoping we all know it was Martha Stewart, not Snoop Dogg. But she paid her debt to society and is now back on television, sometimes with Snoop Dogg, creating recipes, as she did before she became a convicted felon. So that's just one way. Take that blindfold off, Lady Justice. Apply the rule of law to everyone equally. And a person you might not expect to be the convicted felon is indeed that person. So as all of us, or most of us probably on this call know, what are the sources of the law? Of course, the federal and state constitutions. And as I think this is particularly appropriate today as we honor Chief Justice Mark Cady. Many of his most well-known opinions applied the Iowa Constitution, specifically analyzed and applied the Iowa Constitution. Of course, there's 3 branches of government. The legislative branch makes the law at the state, federal, and local level. The executive branch, which includes president, the governor, local officials, implement the laws. And these include the administrative agencies at the federal, state, and local levels. And then our primary focus today, the 3rd branch of government, the judicial branch, and our courts. So judges, federal, state, local levels interpret the laws and regulations and apply those laws and regulations to the facts, to the credible, competent evidence in each case. So how does America, or I should say the United States of America, ensure that its laws apply to everyone? Fair and impartial court, judicial, administrative agency systems, and making that statement that we see here on the US Supreme Court building a reality for all who appear in federal, state, local courts, all who appear before administrative law judges or administrative agencies. Equal justice under the law. What are judicial branch courts? Of course, these include our state trial courts here in the 99 counties of Iowa, our appellate court, the Iowa Court of Appeals, and the Iowa Supreme Court. And it's interesting, again, in considering Chief Justice Mark Cady, he was a state trial court judge, and then he was a judge on the Iowa Court of Appeals and the Iowa Supreme Court. And then, of course, the highest level, the US Supreme Court. And then our federal courts here in Iowa, they're located in Des Moines, Council Bluffs, Davenport, Cedar Rapids, Sioux City, those US district trial courts. And then the US Courts of Appeal, and we're part of the 8th Circuit Court of Appeal, located in St. Louis, Missouri, and in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And our current Iowa, a member of that court, Jane Kelly. And then those courts, of course, answer to the United States Supreme Court. And Henry will discuss the Supreme Court in more detail later. But the highest level of our 3rd branch of government, our judicial branch. I'll talk a little bit about the administrative agencies and their functions. Both Henry and I happen to have experience as administrative law judges. Henry at the federal level, and my experiences at the state level. So administrative tribunals are a little bit different because they're in the executive branch of government. So that second branch, not the third branch or the judicial branches. But administrative law judges apply the rule of law just as judicial branch judges do. We make decisions in cases that often affect individuals' daily lives, benefits such as Social Security, unemployment benefits, Medicaid, food assistance, the list goes on, and other important areas of individuals' lives, such as workers' compensation, equal employment opportunity, or occupational safety and health or labor relations. Administrative law judges apply the law, the rules, the regulations to the credible, competent evidence in each case and make decisions, applying the rule of law in their day-to-day work. So how do courts in general, all of these courts I just described, state trial courts, federal trial courts, all the appellate courts, the administrative tribunals, and our United States Supreme Courts, how do they protect our commitment to the rule of law? The rule of law that applies equally to all. We apply the law impartially. Everyone, no matter who you are, no matter where you've come from, no matter your background, your level of education, your experience, you have the right to equal justice under the law. Now let's just give a few examples. Would it be equal justice if a judge always rules in favor of, let's say, a plaintiff instead of a defendant? I think the easy, obvious answer is no, of course, no. Would it be equal justice if a judge tells jokes that disparage people of a certain ethnic heritage? I think that's a quick and easy answer. Of course, the answer is no. That's a clear indication of a judge's bias. Would it be equal justice if a judge decides a case in favor of someone because that person's a powerful politician? I think that's an easy and obvious answer. It would not be, no, it would not be equal justice. And that this question was answered many times over the past year or two. Would it be equal justice if a judge who decides a case in favor of someone because they donated money to that judge's favorite charity? Easy answer. No, it would not be equal justice. And hopefully that does not happen here in Iowa. How else do courts protect our country's commitment to the rule of law? Due process. What does due process mean? Basically, that just means fair procedures, notice. You get notice that you're supposed to appear in a court or an administrative tribunal. You know what day, what time, where you're supposed to appear. If it's a virtual setting, as many of us have experienced over the last few years, your notice includes exactly how to join that court or administrative proceeding. You're entitled to a timely, orderly, and in most cases, public process. In some types of cases, not all, you may be entitled, have a right to counsel. I should say, in all cases, you have a right to counsel. In some cases, you have the right to a counsel to be provided to you by the government in criminal cases, for example. You always have the opportunity to be heard. Judges apply the rule of law, apply due process when they allow each party the opportunity to be heard. And it's important that judges listen with open eyes, open ears, and recognizing any implicit biases they may hold, and setting aside those biases and hearing and interpreting the information that they hear. People have the right to call witnesses in their cases, and the right to confront all of the witnesses involved in the case. And all parties, a big part of due process or fair procedures in court is that right to appeal. If you're not satisfied with the initial ruling, the initial decision, or some of the initial procedures in that state trial court, that federal trial court, or that administrative tribunal, you have the right to appeal to a higher court. Now, here's a few more would it be fair questions. Would it be fair if a judge decides a case based on letters to the editor or a newspaper editorial? In other words, a judge decides a case based on what we call the court of public opinion? Of course not. Would it be fair if another form of court of public opinion is evident outside the courthouse? Or if a judge sees a public opinion poll? Of course not. Or if an elected official makes a speech and suggests a way a case could be decided. Or in the states, this is a national presentation. So in those states where judges are elected, or here in Iowa, where judges are up for a retention election every few years, would that be fair? See, in all of these cases, of course, if any of these things happened, it would not, of course, not be fair, and the judges would not be applying the rule of law. So what would it be like if any of these things happened? Some individuals, groups above the law, individuals and groups created laws that required courts to decide cases based on all of these classifications, backgrounds. The list could go on and on and on. Answer is, we would not be applying the rule of law. We would not be applying due process or making sure everyone is equal before the law. So hopefully now it's very clear what is the rule of law. No one's above the law. The law rules, not a single individual or group of individuals. So how do we ensure this? That our government remains a government of laws, not of individual people or an individual person. So we must do all we can in our power to maintain our fair and impartial courts, maintain those courts that ensure the laws apply to everyone equally and fairly, and that no one is above the law. We're all subject to the law. We all have the right to equal justice under the law. We all have the right to fair and impartial procedures. So preserving our fair and impartial courts at all levels preserves the rule of law. And I must also mention some of these questions, I hope were obvious ways that judges would violate their ethical codes of conduct. So all Iowa judicial branch judges have a specific ethical code of conduct. All of the administrative law judges in Iowa have a specific code of conduct. And the federal level has codes of their own codes of conduct. So this is the important codes of ethics that judges must follow, and all of these ethical codes ensure that judges in the judicial branch and in the executive branch apply the rule of law. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for indulging me in this, presenting this this program, Henry. I turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, thanks, Emily. That was powerful. Thank you for that presentation. I'm going to pick up where Emily has left off. And I'm going to start with just saying that we have to remember an independent judiciary is an absolute necessity in a democracy such as ours. Even if you look at the Declaration of Independence, when we went to war with the Crown, there were 27 grievances cited in the Declaration of Independence. 10 of them, more than 9, had to do with the interference by the king with the independence of the judiciary, interference with the king with the proper rule of juries, even excluding some colonists from jury trials, and just the overall rejection of the concepts of the rule of law and equal justice for all. And as I talk about the challenges we face, an independent judiciary is more important now than it has ever been in recent years. Our democracy, our representative form of government, faces some serious challenges within the next 10 years. Indeed, the future of our democracy may very well depend upon the efforts of folks like you all over the country, lawyers and students and private citizens, and the efforts that we put forth in this nation to save it. When you look at our democracy, there's primarily 3 guardrails, 3 ways to hold the government accountable. And when I say this, I do want to remind you that the views and opinions expressed are my own and are not to be attributed to any past, present, or future employer. But when you think about the guardrails of democracy, you think about the press that holds government accountable through shedding light on the processes. You think about the will of the people expressed through our electoral processes, where if you're don't like something, you're upset with a member of the government, you go to the polls and you can express your will. And then lastly, it's the judiciary and lawyers. And now each of those institutions, those guardrails of our democracy are under attack. The press is under attack. We see recently where the legitimate press is unduly and overly criticized, and alternative sources of news spouting alternative facts are hyped up. The press's job is to hold government officials accountable by shedding light on the processes. Well, the press's job is made more difficult when we don't believe the legitimate press, or when we don't even believe our very eyes or our very ears. And it takes away one of the important checks that we have on government actions. There's also been physical attacks. We heard about it in other countries, but now we see an uprising in actual physical attacks and calling for violence against members of the press. There are stories of the press's equipment being seized, reporters being arrested, reporters' notes being seized, or even reporters and their documents being subpoenaed to court. We've seen an uprise in frivolous defamation suits against the legitimate press. These suits are costly, and they affect the press's bottom line in a time of financial stress already. And if you recall, the importance of the press is that some of our more significant public discussions, policy discussions, and policy initiatives and changes have come about because of media coverage of events. You know, we just saw that the media coverage of George Floyd, or even going back 30 years ago, Rodney King, how important that coverage was to forcing us into national debates that probably otherwise would not have taken place. And so there again, we underscore the importance of the role of the press. And that's being challenged in the future and challenged now, and will be. We talked about challenges to the electoral processes. That's another check on government action. The will of the people as expressed through the electoral processes. We still, 2 years after the 2020 election, there are still large numbers of Americans that are unwilling to accept the results of that election. And this is important because one of the components of a democracy is that the citizens or members of one side accept defeat, and that both parties to an election, whether successful or unsuccessful, work together for the betterment of the nation until the next election. And then once again, you can express your will at the polls. Well, when that's threatened, our democracy is threatened. And when I say this, is not just, you know, millions of ordinary citizens, but what we're seeing now is we have folks that we look to for leadership. Right now, there were, I think, presently 127 or so retired military generals and admirals that questioned the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Across the nation, Secretary of States in the various states generally are the top election officials responsible for certifying statewide electoral results in their respective states. Well, this year we have 27 elections are taking place for Secretary of States across this nation. And my information shows that 13 candidates in these elections are not willing to say that the results of the 2020 election were legitimate. Along with that, across the nation, you have these folks, I guess they call them election deniers, on the ballot in 48 of the 50 states. Approximately 299 candidates altogether across the country. And what's troubling is that they're predicting that 171 of these folks are in safe districts where they're pretty much guaranteed to be elected. So you put that together, of these election deniers, and then the frivolous allegations of fraud, sowing further distrust in our elections, and with actions that we also have seen an uptick in making it more difficult to vote in certain communities of this nation, and also an uptick in redistricting practices purely calculated to dilute the vote of some and strengthen the vote of others. So with those two pillars of those three guardrails, those two guardrails of the three being delegitimized, the press, the electoral processes, it falls upon the judiciary and lawyers, the legal profession, to preserve democracy. In many ways, with the press being attacked and the electoral will of the people being attacked, lawyers and judges may be the last defense against democracy. And so one of the purposes of this Katie Day presentation is to educate the public and attorneys and to seek further engagement from the public and the attorneys to support a fair and independent judiciary. And the question of Melvin, so how is the legal profession and the judiciary being attacked? Well, the underfunding of the judicial branch impacts its effectiveness. The underfunding of contract attorneys for indigent defense works undermines democracy by making it more difficult for attorneys to fulfill the constitutional obligation under the Constitution to provide a defense for those who otherwise can't afford an attorney. The politicizing of judicial selections and retentions. We're seeing more and more interference with the judicial selection and retention processes, even here in Iowa, where our system of merit selection has been the envy of the country since 1962. And we're seeing more and more encroachments from the executive and the legislative branch into that process. And then also the restricting the review of legislative action from the judiciary. And this is taking place, I think Emily alluded to it, there's a case in the Supreme Court that would be heard either later this year or early next year, Moore versus Harper. The North Carolina legislature is before the Supreme Court alleging that the North Carolina state courts have no say over how it redistricts or enacts any rules within North Carolina, because running the elections in North Carolina is solely the province of the legislature. And of course, that goes against what most of us held dear about our system, in that the courts were able to review judicial action to see if it was unconstitutional. So this case has made it to the Supreme Court. We all anxiously await the outcome of that case, but that could be a vital attack against one of the guardrails against our democracy. So we hope you all take to heart the information you heard today, and that you're not only encouraged to engage to fulfill your civic duties, as Melvin's going to talk about in a few minutes here, but also engage others in fulfilling their civic duties and into preserving our rule of law and our democracy. And with that, Melvin, would you like to tell folks about action they can take to participate in democracy, preserve democracy, and educate and engage others to do the same?
Thank you, Judge and President Henry Hamilton. Thank you for setting me up so nicely with the last reference to the Supreme Court case concerning the Carolinas, South Carolina. Let me, in the next few minutes, because we only have a few left, let me frame your question or challenge to me by saying this, asking a question about what is democracy? What is democracy? And credit goes to an educator and an author, Phyllis Maxey Ferdinand, who in 2014 wrote an article on this question, and it is posted today, has been posted for a while, on the ABA, American Bar Association website, along with other more recent events that deal with democracy. So what I'm going to read to you is very relevant and touches on some of the things that you heard. All right. Democracy, what is it? Many definitions and characteristics, and they include, and I'll give you 7, you can count them. 1, government leaders gain power by peaceful means. 2, government leaders can be removed by the people or their elected representatives. 3, individuals have basic rights and freedoms, such as speech, press, assembly, and religion. Think of these things as I go through the rest. Think of those characteristics in the context of what is happening nationally. Juxtapose those characteristics to what we're seeing play out across this state and many other states in the US. 4, regular elections with 2 or more political parties. Sound familiar? Secret ballots and majority rule are part of the political process. Think about that. 5, individuals and groups are protected from unfair government actions that take away their lives, property, or freedom. How true does that ring? 6, the media freely reports news from around the world and presents favorable and unfavorable views of government action. We're seeing this in the Ukraine. 7, the country's courts make rulings for and against the government and help protect citizens' rights. In other words, people are equal before the law. I'm going to post in the chat a link to those 7 characteristics, which I obtained from the ABA. And I'm giving you links that where you can easily go and find support for what I am saying to you today. All right, let me also frame this, Henry, before I articulate 1, 2, 3, 4 things folks can do. Let me say this about democracy. All right, our US courts on its website, this is what our US federal courts say about the rule of law. The power of the people is superior to the judicial branch and legislative branch. And where the will of the legislature stands in opposition to that of the people, as we declared in the Constitution, the judges ought to be governed by the latter rather than the former. In other words, the rule of law is a principle under which all persons, institutions, and entities are accountable to rules and laws that are 1, publicly promulgated, equally enforced, independently adjudicated. That's 3. Number 4, the laws are consistent with international human rights principles. Just look at the news from a year ago, 2 years ago. Think about international human rights. And then lastly, courts play an integral role in maintaining this rule of law that we've so much talked about. Emily gave us a great slide presentation of what that is. The courts play an integral role in maintaining the rule of law, particularly when they hear our complaints, our grievances, voiced not only by minority groups or by those who hold minority positions. Equality before the law, remove the mask perhaps. Equality before the law is a fundamental bedrock. It's the sine qua non of American jurisprudence. So to answer Judge Hamilton's questions, what are some things that we can do? So 1 is educate the public about how important elections are. We've seen this play out, but take a moment to educate yourself. I'm going to post in the chat some information from the League of City of Women Voters on this. Let me do this very quickly. I think I can do this. So that I want you to have this link so that you have another resource for yourself. There it is. It's in the chat. Second, take a moment at this election season to promote an understanding about what an election worker does, and even take the step to become a poll worker. We've heard the complaints about our election process, and even in this state, since 2018, I think it was, there have only been 9 prosecuted cases of election fraud. We're not talking about hundreds and thousands. We're not talking about folks running off machines. We're talking about what can we do to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to vote, and that there's no intimidation at the polls. Emily, I think you recently registered as a poll worker. Is that right?
Correct. I saw the link this morning. I clicked on it. I signed up to be a poll worker. It took less than a minute, probably more like 10 or 20 seconds. So all of you who might possibly be available on election day, I challenge you to do the same thing.
Thank you, Emily. Another thing that you can do, since this is election time, you should have free access to the Iowa State Bar Association Judicial Performance Evaluation. It was just released within the last 2 weeks or so. You can go to the Iowa State Bar Association website, look for the performance evaluation. The performance evaluation, it was opinions or evaluations by over 1,100 attorneys in this state who are rating or evaluating judges whom they appear before or have an opinion about, or have some substantive knowledge to rate them as a very good or not so good judge. Take a look at that, because in just about every county, there are judges who are standing for retention. We know judges are appointed by our governor, and every so many years, those judges stand for retention. Look at the judicial performance evaluation to find out the judges that are who are in your district, how they fare, and look at our judges statewide. My understanding is among all of our judges, we have 80% of those are rated very favorable, and whatever metric that is by someone who's doing the evaluation. So we as a state, we do have a great body of judges. I do want to say that. What else can you do? Follow a thought leader, meaning follow a podcast on a topic that you're interested in, or maybe you're not so much interested in. Listen to listen to other views, right? So follow a thought leader. Join a group that you're interested in that's working on a social justice issue, a civil rights issue, or an issue that's in your community. Be proactive and step out. Second or third, donate to a cause. There are many nonprofit organizations that have been created, especially since 2020 and before, but need support, service on boards as board of directors and as volunteers, and they sorely need donations. Find a cause that's in your area and donate to that cause. What else can you do? Write an opinion letter to a newspaper. Yes, we still have newspapers. They're still in circulation, although there are a lot of them are digital now. You can still get many delivered on your doorstep. But even those, however you receive the paper, has opinion columns. So write a letter to the editor about an issue. Thoughtfully write a letter about an issue. And then lastly, host or attend a debate on a topic that's important to you or that's important to the community. These are inexpensive ways in which we can be involved in the body politic, contribute to the rule of law, and then ensure that we do have a democracy that bears some resemblance of those 7 characteristics. President Hamilton, I turn it over to you.
Melvin, thanks for that powerful presentation. And those are all steps I think that will benefit democracy and the rule of law. We have about 5 minutes left, and we can open it up for questions, and then I can also read off some of these links in the chat. I'm not sure if everyone's getting these chats or just the presenters, but anyway, please raise your hand if you have any questions, or if you have any input to how we can support the rule of law and support democracy.
While we wait for a question, President Hamilton, are you,
Yes.
as you travel across the state, are you being asked by some of the attendees at various meetings what the Iowa State Bar Association is doing, or are we addressing the issue? What's your take on that?
Well, the good thing is that, yes, I'll say yes, that folks are troubled by what's going on. More and more people are realizing the threats to the rule of law and the threats to the democracy, and they're not happy about it. But I think a lot of people don't know what to do about it. They feel powerless and voiceless, and then even some. You really have to educate them on what the rule of law is. They're not really understanding that. And what I tell them that at its core, the rule of law means that as far as the justice system and our courts are concerned, whether regardless of your gender, regardless of your race, or regardless of whether your family grew up without shoes, you had a family that shared shoes, or you came from a family that purchased nothing but designer shoes. Everyone is treated the same in the eyes of the law. And that's what we're trying to preserve, every one of us, from the homeless to a person that owns the most expensive land in San Francisco or New York. And that's the message we're taking across the state.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, there's a question in the chat, and if you would take a look at it, it's posed by BW. Take a moment and look at that question. I'll read it aloud if you wish, or just go straight to the answer.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll read it. I'm wondering about educating high schoolers about the rule of law and overall concept. I don't believe it was something that was covered while I was in high school. Are there presentations that happen at schools now just to give students an understanding of the concept? There's not a lot of stuff going on. I know the Iowa State Bar Association has made this a priority this year to do more civics education, as has the Bar Foundation. We're finding out that if the Iowa State Bar Association and the Bar Foundations and other nonprofit groups are not teaching not only students, but even adults about civic education, they're kind of hard pressed to find that source today. Let's hear from Emily Chafa, and then we'll have some closing.
Sure. The presentation I gave this afternoon is exactly something that could be presented at a high school. I've done it before in the Des Moines area, even some middle school students. So the American Bar Association has that program available, and in a moment I'll put that specific link in the chat. As you've also just seen in the chat, the ABA also has a Law Day program every year. This year it's actually focused on civics and civility and collaboration. So again, this point of trying to find a way to provide the civics education that isn't necessarily provided in many of our schools today. So the ABA, the American Bar Association, has a number of resources, and they have a lot of resources for schools at various levels. So there's a program on the rule of law, or some basics, of our 3 branches of government for elementary school, middle school, high school. And then the Law Day theme changes every year. And as is listed here in 2020, it was 2021, the Law Day theme was preserving the rule of law now, which has a myriad, or I would say a plethora of resources on this very topic. And then the 2022 theme was toward a more perfect union, focused on the US Constitution and all of its promises, and how many of those promises have been fulfilled or not. But it's a very interesting, and all of these ABA Law Day resources are designed for the general public, and many are designed for students. So elementary, middle school, high school level. And then, as I'd mentioned, the 2023 Law Day theme is civics, civility, and collaboration. So focused on, again, on this very topic. So I hope that's helpful. And there's a list of various resources in the chat now. Thank you.
All right, great. All right, well, folks, that brings this to an end. I want to thank you for attending the Iowa State Bar Association's People's Law School program, Advancing the Rule of Law Now, Accountability and Access, a Call to Action, put on in conjunction with the 2022 Katie Day of Service. I want to thank the Iowa State Bar Association, the officers, the staff, particularly Virginia Sipes, for making this possible, and also thank the Polk County Bar Association, Carol Phillips and Sonia Diener, for also making this possible. And folks, thank you, and we'll see you next year for the 2023 Katie Day of Service. Have a good day and be safe. Bye-bye.
Thanks.